welcome to Let's Fly VFR. Today we're going to find out why a lot of pilots die, at least in the real world. This is prompted by a video that I saw recently from another great YouTube channel called Flight Chops. So I wanted to discuss this because if you're a real world pilot, or if you're an aspiring real world pilot, there's all these things called VSpeeds as you see shooting across the screen there. And there are quite a lot. There's some really important ones for you to learn, so you can feel free to stop the video and have a quick look at this because it's something that you need to understand. Now, what really prompted this was that the guy from Flight Chops was out doing his biannual flight review, and his instructor had had two people die a year apart, all from the same lack of speed control, essentially. In different situations. So let's go through it. So as we're starting off here, we're hitting our rotation speed, which in the Cessna is 50 knots, and then the actual takeoff speed is about 55. I'm going to use the Cessna just for some examples as we go around, but I want to go through the whole things for you. Now we're heading into best climb speed. Now all of these have abbreviations for you, but I'm not going to I'll mention them, but I'm not going to put them all over the screen for you at the moment because it's just more important about knowing firstly that they exist. So we have a rotation speed, we have a takeoff speed, which are nearly the same. We have a best climb speed. We also have a best glide speed. So if you lose an engine, you need to know what that is. There are speeds that dictate when you can extend your undercarriage. How fast you can fly with the undercarriage already extended. So there's actually two different ones there as we're climbing up here. We're at glorious Seattle. This is a really beautiful place to fly around anyway. And we're heading in the upwind part of the pattern. We're just going to do a circuit around here and just have a look at some of these different speeds that you need to remember. And getting back to the reason for it, the sad part of the video is that most general aviation pilots differ greatly from the way they consider stalls and stall management, and that's what happened to two of the CFI's friends, one friend and one student slash friend. One was taking off with three people in the aircraft, had an engine out at about 300 feet, stalled, spun the aeroplane in, and him and his passengers all died. And pretty much 12 months later, a gentleman in a Skyfox, same runway, same pretty similar weather conditions, had a very similar incident and again stalled and spun in. And it's just all down to that weather speed control, and that's really what I want you guys to have a little think about. So let me go through it. As we're heading down here, we need to be conscious of the right speed to extend our flaps. And we're inside the wide arc. So essentially, if you're in the wide arc, then you can extend your flaps. If you look at the manual for the Cessna, though, I think it will allow you to do it at about 110 knots. But look, if you're in the white zone flaps, the base of the white zone is basically your minimum maneuvering speed with flap, and a little bit below that, there's a new one, which is your minimum maneuvering speed. Sorry, one without flap is at the white, and then there's a little one just below that which is your minimum maneuvering speed with flaps extended. So, and there's a whole range of speeds. When your flaps are up and you're in the circuit, you're doing 80 knots as you put down to 10 degrees, then you go to 20 degrees, it's 70, and down to 30 degrees, and there we go, 20, 30 degrees is 60 knots. So they should be your minimum speeds. Now, the interesting thing that was done in this conversation was the gentleman, the CFI, wandered around the airport when he met this YouTuber, Flight Chops, and he asked a whole lot of airline pilots, what is more important? And I would like you to consider this. What's more important? A good stall recovery technique, or a good stall prevention technique or plan? So here, was a little fun. I don't mind doing this. This is a side slip. This allows me to drop speed really quickly or drop altitude without losing speed. It's a good little technique. Gliders use it a lot as well. Use opposite rudder to your aileron. So if you aileron left, you rudder right. Puts on a lot of drag. The aeroplane drops, but you don't lose your speed. So here we go. We're approaching the runway. And we're going to get our nose up. You're going to change your view to the far end of the runway and monitor the distance between your cowling. There's the nose coming up. Monitor that. Minimum control. So you try and hold it till you get that minimum control speed before the wheels touch. And that is just really good airmanship if you can do that. So let me run through it, the different speeds, and I'll give them. You can find all these on YouTube as well, or so let's go through it. VR is your rotation speed, and in this aircraft it's 55 knots. VX is max angle of speed, or maximum angle that you can take off, and you get that at 62 knots. Your VY, which is your best rate of climb, which is what you normally use when you're climbing out after a takeoff, is about 74 knots in this aircraft. Now the next one is VS. So that's your stall speed, and that's your stall speed clean. Then you have VSO, stall speed with your landing configuration, so gear down and flaps extended. So now there's a whole range of things that you need to really remember. Now if you're going to be flying this as, now I'm going to do this, you're going to be a sim pilot, then you really need to know these things. It just makes it all part of the realism. If you're flying X-Plane 11 or P3D or whatever it might be, and it's a game, just a bit of fun, then that's fine. You can perfectly well do that, and no one's going to bother you about it, that's for sure. But it's just good learning. Now, the next stage of speeds that we can look at, yes, there is quite a few, is VFE, which is your flap extension speed. And then you have VLE, which is your max landing gear extension speed. So that's the speed at which you're allowed to drop your undercarriage, because it won't be, let's say, as rigid while it's transitioning, so it could cause damage to it. You get VLO, which is your maximum landing gear operating speed. And okay, now so we've got some really important ones that we haven't done as yet, so let's run through those. And this is not an absolute conclusive list, but it's got most of them. So you have VNE. Now this is the red line at the very top of your speed indicator. So that's that one there. That means a velocity never exceed, if you like. And this is what we're having a bit of a go at here. So we shouldn't go past that point there. We've exceeded that. You want to be very, very careful as you pull out if you happen to end up in that situation. Yeah, VMC, minimum control speed, which is 40 knots, and that's with your flaps out, from memory. Now we have VA, maneuvering speed. Now this is an important one. If you're flying along flat chat in your Cessna and you start to encounter some bumpy air. Now the air can be pretty violent, so if you want to stop your aircraft from having any structural damage, you need to slow back down. So your normal operating speed, VNO, normal operating speed, is about 129 knots, or is allowed to be at least in the Cessna. But your maneuvering speed is back at 105. So if you get into some turbulence, or you're getting some clouds and you're starting to get thrown around a bit, and you're heading up at 125, 130 knots, you've got to bring it back to that, so the aircraft will structurally be able to take anything that's a little bit on the violent side as you're flying around. And then again, we're just going to have a go at this. We're just going to set it up for best glide speed, which in this aircraft is 65 knots. Now I've done this a few times. Now we're just doing maneuvering speed, so we should be back at 105 knots to throw the aircraft around. And having done the glide speed thing and many of these things for real, flying light sport aircraft, you will be really surprised how far you can actually go if you maintain the right speed. If you fly faster than the speed, you will lose ground, and if you fly slower, you will also lose ground over the distance you will make. Now if you happen to be looking right or left outside your aircraft, generally at 45 degrees down if you look down, 45 degrees up the strut. Look out where that point would hit the ground, and that's about as far as you're going to glide at your maximum speed, or your best glide speed. It's just a quick reference, because again, this is all about visual flying. And if you haven't, if you spend a lot of your time in just looking at the instruments all the time, and I would bet that probably most of us, I'll include myself, do that, because when I did start flying, I got poked in the ribs quite a number of times and being told to get my head out of the cockpit and not there staring intently at these gauges that entrance us as we fly around in our simulator. It's just really important to look out. Now, I have done a video on visual flying and visual references, so you might like to find that in the flight school area and have a bit of a look at that. And I really think it's worthwhile if you're going to enjoy flying. And we have such great scenery here in X-Plane 11 and in P3D. It's pretty fantastic as well. And with the new Flight Sim 2020 coming, that looks truly amazing as far as scenery and graphics go. So if that's your thing, that might be something you'll be excited about as well. So now let's set this up for a best glide and just have a look at how far we go. So we set up a best glide. Now, do you remember what it was? Of course you don't. I'll help you out. So we want to get back to 65 knots. So that's really low. We're getting that stall speed. So let's get our nose down. Remember, your pitch controls your speed and power controls your descent rate. So in this case, if you haven't got it, you can see that the nose isn't actually up very much. And I need to get my nose down. This is a little bit of stall training that I wanted to do first before I headed into getting us set up for the full glide. You can see how well you can hold it, especially with the new updated aerodynamics, and having to rock and roll a little bit just to keep it level to stop that wing dropping. But it's pretty amazing that you can just hold it there. But look at the descent rate on the VSI. Okay, your vertical situation indicator there, it's pegged at the bottom, so we're sinking very, very quickly, but we've been able to maintain it. And so here we are cruising in at our best glide speed and gliding away a little bit. I just wanted to show you that it's not so hard, and I've come quite a ways to get back to this island. We're going to head back and do a landing after this. You will be quite surprised if you give this a go in whatever aircraft. Now, you need to research if you like the Barons, if you like airliners, they all have these speeds. So let's go back to a question I posed earlier. What is more important to you? Do you think you need to have a good stall recovery technique or a good stall prevention regime or technique? Pretty surprisingly, most of the GA pilots said the first. They said we need to have good stall recovery. But isn't prevention better than cure? All the airline pilots said good stall prevention technique, and that is controlling their speed, and that's what it's all about. So is there a solution to this problem? And the reason that, like, just a huge amount of people, about every 4 days, a pilot in the United States, I believe, dies because they haven't controlled their speed and they crash. Okay, we're just going to have a go at a stall here, no flaps, minimum control speed is what we're aiming at, and see whether we can actually control it as well. The figures were pretty frightening on how many people die in light aircraft because they don't control their speed. So what is the solution? Obviously, we've just gone through all these different speeds, and I bet you don't remember half of them. Would be a good guess. I hope that's probably about right. But what the airlines have in place is they have decided that they will have a different base level speed, and they call it VS1. So what that is your minimum control speed times 1.404, and that is marked and should be marked on your on your speed indicator. And unless you are actually over the runway, you will never proceed to a speed less than that. And it seems fairly simple, but that's the whole strategy, is being very, very aware of your speeds and making sure that you don't kill yourself by getting too slow. And sadly, it happens too often with GA pilots. So if you're a tube liner, I hope you already knew that. If you're a GA pilot, I hope you've learned something. I hope I've helped you out with that, and you've enjoyed the video while we've been wandering around in our default aeroplane at our default airport. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed that. Join us here at Let's Fly VFR. Come to the letsflyvfr.com website. If you haven't subscribed and you enjoyed, please bang that subscribe button for me as well. Hit the bell, and I will catch you back here for another video at Let's Fly VFR again real soon. Maybe we'll have some fun next time. It won't be quite so educational. See you then. Bye bye.